Hi guys, it's Mr. Charette or Mr. C. Most of my students call me Mr. C. So, how's it going? So I thought I'd make this video just to verbally go through the summative with you guys. It is a long document, but the idea of these detailed instructions is to give you sort of a step-by-step guide as to what we're looking for each section. And the purpose of this document is to mimic a business plan that you would actually show to investors. So when you start a new business as an entrepreneur, it's expected that you have your plans well laid out, that you know exactly what you're going to do with the money that they give you. You have a plan in terms of how you'll operate. I mean, most of the time you'll have to be operating already. Investors won't give money to, someone who just has a plan and nothing else. Now, obviously, we can't really do that in this class, but it's important to know, it's important to think of all the things that a business requires. It's important to be able to show what you plan to do as well as what you're currently doing, and it's important to transmit that information to the investors in a way that they will understand, B, that shows how you plan to keep your business afloat, how you plan to make money, how you plan to give the investors money, because the whole point of investing is to get a return on your investment, and to show how you're going to grow your business in the future and how you're going to operate this thing day to day. Now, that's a big scope, which is why you've been given all this time to come up with this document. You're expected, in terms of how to actually do this, each section of this summative draws on, hold on, I'm just seeing. Well, I mean, each section of this summative draws on lessons that you should have learned already. So, what type of business, whether it's a sole proprietorship, partnership, etc. You can add franchise. You know what? I'm actually going to add it right now. Actually, I'm just going to go through each section afterwards. But the idea of this is to start from the earliest lessons and progress through the lessons that you've learned with Miss Daya. And each section of this business plan gives you an opportunity to demonstrate what you've learned from those lessons over the course of the class. So I should say something I saw earlier is use the lessons. They're your best ally. Some of these lessons are actually mine, which is kind of cool from earlier in the class. Use the lessons. And it's a very good idea, especially if you're looking for level 4, to bring in outside research to back up your claims, your stances on certain things, and justify, the reason for your business to exist, the reason why investors should invest in you. So for example, if I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head. If you're making the claim that there's a gap in the market that your business would fill, then you want to provide empirical proof that that gap exists. If you don't know what empirical means, it means numerical data. So it's one thing for some random person on the internet to say, oh, this would be a great thing, there's a need for this. It's quite another thing to say, 35% of homeowners are lacking in this area and they aren't able to get blank service because of reasons A, B, and C. Obviously, one of those carries a lot more weight, it has a lot more value, and it concretely demonstrates the reason for your business to exist and why investors should invest in you. Don't forget to cite your sources, both in text and at the end of the document. For in-text, you can just put in brackets the URL from the site that you got your data from. Because if you don't cite your stuff, it opens you up to plagiarism. And, you don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with that. So just make sure you cite your stuff. My advice is do it as you copy and paste the quotes or as you take data and paraphrase. So let's see. So we have just an overview. We've got, these early components here are how you actually write the document. So title page, table of contents, letter of transmittal in terms of how you're actually addressing this. So you're treating me, Mr. C, as your investor. So I'm a rich dude. I have millions of dollars, and it's your job to convince me why I should give you some of my money, or correction, why I should invest in you. Shows like Think Dragon's Den. Hopefully you guys have seen some Dragon's Den. If you haven't, check out an episode. They're 20 minutes, and they're broken down into little sections. Like you can watch just YouTube Dragon's Den best of or something. And you can see how these people, some people do a really bad job, by the way. So if you're going to do this, I recommend putting, best, not so much best presentations, but put in like best business proposals for Dragon's Den. But what happens in Dragon's Den is people who run a business walk into a room with 5 very rich Canadians sitting there, and it's the presenter's job to convince them in 7-8 minutes why they should give them however many hundreds of thousands of dollars in exchange for a percentage equity of the company. Now, I don't expect you to do a Dragon's Den style presentation, but I do expect you to have or develop a deep understanding of your business idea, to back up your claims, to justify your business's existence with research that you have cited, and I expect you to demonstrate your learning of the material throughout the course, most of which will apply to this. But anyway, so title page, table of contents. So this is all very standard report style stuff. If you're unsure what a table of contents is, just Google it. It's just a table that lists all the subheadings that your report goes through. Executive summary, do that last. An executive summary is really important. It's basically the difference between an executive summary and a summary is that an executive summary is written with the investor or executive, which is why it's called that, in mind. So giving a summary of your document is one thing. Giving a summary that gives an executive the key pieces they want to know to decide whether they want to invest in you or not is another. So this is where you put all your... Basically, a good idea would be to summarize the sections that you believe are most important to convincing someone to invest in you. So why does your business exist? Why should they invest in you? What's your plan for staying successful and competitive? Maybe give the summaries of your SWOT analysis and Porter analysis if you choose to do one. Stuff like that. Let's see. And then there's an example here. Okay, so let's go through section by section. So the first one, company/industry/product or service. So this is primarily research based, and it's also has your, well, actually most of this comes from you. So your product or service is going to come from you. The company style is all going to come from you. But use this as a chance to demonstrate your learning of what businesses are, what types of business there are. The choice of these things should not be random. You should be making a choice based on the pros and cons for each one. In terms of owners, explain, if you're going to be in a partnership, explain what each partner is bringing to the table. If you're going to be in a corporation, explain why you're choosing that, because hopefully, as you know, being a corporation has its significant pros and significant cons. So it's a very conscious decision. Same thing with franchises. Now, the idea here would be you wouldn't be a franchise right now. So if you choose franchise, basically what you're doing is choosing to franchise in the future. So that would be part of your growth. And based off the mini lesson that I gave you, I'd expect you to justify why you think it's franchisable and how you'd actually franchise. and why you're choosing that. Okay, so what business are you in? So this will come from you for the most part. The principal characteristics of the industry, this is all research. So yeah, just understanding what industry you're in, why you're choosing to be in it. I'll give you an example. The culinary industry, and if you don't know what that is, that's all the industry of restaurants. It's changing with delivery to home and stuff, but the culinary industry is basically anything to do with food preparation. And the culinary industry is one of the most competitive industries in the world. And if you didn't know, restaurants have an 80% fail rate. It might even be higher than that. COVID-19 has closed an incredible amount of restaurants. So pre-COVID-19, so before that, the failure rate was 80%. It's higher now. I'm not going to tell you why, just in case. I think a few of you are doing a culinary thing, so I don't want to do too much of your work for you. But 80% of restaurants fail within 5 years, which is mind-boggling. You'd think, I'll set up a burger joint and, people like burgers. Let's go for it. It's much more complicated than that. And there's a reason why restaurants are so competitive. They're easy to start up. They're very hard to master and to stand out and stuff like that. But anyway, I'm not going to tell you anymore, but that's the kind of research we're talking about. Now, it's important. I don't want you to just do research as to why your industry is good. Okay, that's called being biased. You don't want to do that. If you are biased, your investors will pick up on it, and I'm talking about real life, and I'll pick up on it. And that raises questions. Why is this person not addressing the challenges that industry has? It's much better to be upfront about the challenges that you're going to face, because it shows that you are aware of what's happening in the industry, and it shows that you have prepared to overcome those challenges. That's a good principle for life too. I'm going to get a little teacher on you and say it's much, much better to openly acknowledge the challenges that you're facing and deal with them head on, rather than sometimes avoidance can work, but it's generally speaking, it's much better to be aware of the challenges that you're going to face and develop a plan to tackle them, rather than just, avoid and hope for the best. That rarely works out. All right, let's move on. I don't want to take too much time per section. Ethical and social responsibility. We didn't cover ethics, I don't think, just because I wanted to get the summative started. So I'll make this a bonus. If you want to cover ethics, fantastic. If you don't, not a big deal. But anyway, let's press on. Market analysis. This is all research, but then you should take it one step further. Gathering info is great, but it's what you do with the info that matters the most. So you want to gather your research about the different topics that are listed here, and then explain what you're going to do with that info, or what you're hypothetically doing with this information. Because, info is not worth anything if you don't use it. So in terms of the market description, now you guys know about this. This is demographics, consumer profile, stuff like that. I know I saw that in a lesson from earlier, so definitely go back and have a look at that. Now this is, doing primary research could only be done online, and it would be difficult. So if you want to just do secondary, that's totally fine. I get that. What was I going to say? Okay, target market. So this is demographics, consumer profile, needs and wants. So this, I didn't see the other point. What motivates them to buy this type of product and stuff. This is really important. You could make an argument that this is one of the primary things that your business is built on. So having an understanding of your customer is key. So, and as you can imagine, if you create a product to satisfy a need that you think people have, your business could work, or it could crash and burn. You want to know what customers want. You want to know who your customers are so that you can serve them as best as possible. Now, obviously, this is based off a hypothetical business idea, but doing research, looking at, polls, surveys, there's lots of like journal articles out there. You guys have access to the library online and different journals and stuff like that. So try and use the most concrete data that you can. And yeah, this is why they're going to buy from you, basically, and who's going to buy from you. So obviously really important. Market size. So how many potential customers? This is going to vary wildly depending on what kind of business you're in and what kind of research you can conduct. But again, it comes down to finding the most reliable data that you can. I mean, you don't want to spend an hour looking at market size. Target market is far more important. So I'd say this one is a little less important. It's obviously important, but not nearly as important as this. So when you're doing your market research, definitely pick your targets. Decide how much time you're going to put into this, and decide what the most important data is, and state that. Like the summative is designed to still take the 3 hours per week. So if you're running out of time and you've got a great target market and you don't have this, state that. Don't just say I ran out of time though. Like say we found this, we would like to know X, Y, and Z, but we don't think that's particularly important at this time for these reasons. And if you justify that, fantastic. Industry analysis. What industry are you in? I think that was covered earlier, wasn't it? I know I saw something about industry. Whatever, it doesn't matter. What industry are you in? Is the industry growing? So basically, look at the news. That's a great. The news always covers this, especially right now in COVID-19. Everyone's talking about virtually every industry. So this should be really easy to find some info as to what's happening in almost any industry, and whether it's how it's being affected by COVID-19, whether it's growing or shrinking, and then do something with this. Like if it's growing, fantastic. How are you going to take advantage of it? If the industry is dying and, businesses are being closed constantly, how are you going to overcome that? This is real business. It's a hypothetical business idea, but this is meant to be treated as a real document. So how are you going to deal with this? And I think that's it we got competition. Yes. So assess 4 to 5 closest competitors. Are they direct or indirect? This is one of the lessons I made, the direct and indirect competition and stuff like that. Really interesting stuff. Doing 4 would definitely be level 4. My recommendation would be aim for 2 direct and 2 indirect. If you can find a 5th easily, fantastic. But if you find 4, like 2 direct, 2 indirect, and you do some quality research on them, that's 4. You don't need 5. When I say that's 4, I mean that's level 4. Oh, SWOT analysis. I love SWOT analysis. They're great. So yeah, this will be research-based. Have a few points in each. The internal ones will come from you. So the strengths and weaknesses will be the easier component of SWOT. But don't just... the quality of your info determines your achievement in this. So don't just say, oh, we make fantastic food. Well, okay, that's great. But let's try and have some more impactful stuff. And this will depend on... the business you're in, right? But try and come up with strengths that will help you succeed. And this, when I say help you succeed, it comes back to this, like if COVID-19 is killing your industry right now, then how are your strengths going to help you survive? And how are your weaknesses going to expose you to problems, right? Opportunities or threats. Obviously, COVID-19 is going to play a huge role in this. Don't just make it all about COVID-19. It is a big headline right now, but there's more to business and to the environment than that. Don't forget that strengths and weaknesses are internal and opportunities and threats are external. So these two will be made up by you, and these two will come from research. Market share potential. So research your market and your industry. What is the number? So when we say what is the number, what market share does this industry have? How is it broken down? And how do you think, what kind of market share do you think you're going to get? This will come down to who your customers are, which we covered earlier, right there. And what was I going to say? Yeah, it'll come down to who your customers are, how quickly you think your business is going to grow, and stuff like that. What do you think yours will be in the first month, year, or 3 years? Obviously, this is very hypothetical. I wouldn't worry about this all that much. If you have an indication, fantastic. But the most important part, I think, is this one right here, which is how do you plan on getting this market share? So how do you plan on getting more customers? How do you plan to increase your market share? There's lots of ways you can do this. It's important to be smart about it because some efforts can backfire. For example, almost everyone goes to lowering their prices. And if you lower your prices, yes, obviously more customers are going to buy from you, but you're also cutting out your profits, which affects your ability to expand your business. It affects your ability to market properly. It affects how much money you get as an owner. So don't just say we're going to charge cheaper than everyone else. That's the easy way out, and it does backfire. So if your business is based on selling cheaper commodities, then sure. Like, I'm not attacking the notion of saying you can charge less. I'm just saying be aware that charging less does have an impact on you as a business and an owner, and try and be creative with how you're going to increase your market share. Let's see. Marketing strategy. Okay, this is the fun one. So what's your brand image, name, logo, slogan going to be? I know you covered this fairly recently. What's your actual product or the service that you're offering? Product, well, the word product can mean either good or service. So what's your good? What's your service? What are the competitive advantages of it? What does your PLC look like? PLC is product lifecycle, by the way. Pricing, that's always interesting. So what's your pricing strategy? This will depend on what kind of product you're selling. And, choose your pricing strategy conscientiously, meaning, put some thought into it. Businesses never charge random prices unless it's a very small business, like a shack on the side of the road that sells tourist stuff, and even then it's not chosen randomly. Give you an example. If you're one of the reasons, if you've ever wondered why businesses sell stuff with 99 at the end, always, it's to make prices look smaller. So usually companies do that when they're selling commodities, stuff that's available widely. And so they want you to think you're getting a good deal because you can buy it anywhere. If you're buying higher quality items, things that are not that available, that are exclusive, you'll charge a higher price than others, and you'll probably have an even price. To convey, product quality. Even's just a nicer number, psychologically speaking. Our brains like even numbers. There are other strategies, so don't just use the two that I just gave you. Make sure you review the lesson and choose the strategies that best suit your product. Place, channels of distribution. So where do your ingredients come from? Now, I'm not expecting you to actually give me a map, saying where your stuff comes from. But if you're getting ingredients from overseas and stuff, what country are you going to get them from? How do you want the stuff to be transported? Are there any issues with any ingredients that you're using? And when I say ingredients, I don't just mean food. Like if you're selling a cell phone case, then you're going to need plexiglass, or not plexiglass, but the glass or whatever material you're using to create that case has to be bought and stored somewhere. Are there challenges to that? Does it have to be kept at a specific temperature, et cetera, et cetera? Is shipping expensive for, this type of product? And that'll depend on what the ingredients are. Promotion, this is a fun one. So, how are you going to promote your product? Do you want to do YouTube ads? Do you want to do radio? Do you want to do newspaper? Now, those are media. But what kind of content is your promotions going to have? Are you going to go the humor route? Are you going to go the heart-stirring route? Are you going to go with shock value? How do you want to promote your stuff? All of this comes back to lessons, So make sure you check your lessons. Don't just make it all up. You know what I mean? The lessons are there to guide you. Yeah, and so let's see. If you want to create a poster or something fantastic, you don't need to. I'm looking for more of a plan here than anything else. And, the more concrete the plan is, you don't need to give me dates in terms of when you're going to post stuff, but lay out a plan for how you're going to promote this. So if you're going to do a social media campaign as part of your promotional stuff, tell me what kind of posts you're going to make. Are you going to ask people to share? If so, why? How are you going to engage your target market, which we learned about earlier? So you're seeing how different components of the summative feed into each other. And target market is a big one. It's influenced a lot of stuff so far. But the kind of promotions you choose will be to appeal to this group. And you're not going to do a raging shock value commercial if your primary target market are 70-year-old elderly people. That's not going to work. Elderly people do not like shocking things. Fun story, by the way. If you ever wondered, Cadillac, the car company, their cars were bought almost exclusively by elderly people until the early 2000s, when they radically changed their car design, and they featured their new Cadillacs in the movie The Matrix, and Matrix Reloaded, I think, was the main one. But they changed their promos, they changed their products, they changed everything about their image to scare away the old people, because they didn't want a brand image where their cars were being bought as hearses, for elderly people who wanted a really reliable, boringish car. Now, there's nothing wrong with selling cars to elderly people. It's a good market, but it is a shrinking one. And for whatever reason, Cadillac CEOs did not want their primary target market to be elderly people, so they changed how they promoted the car, how they designed the car, everything, to appeal to a different target market. So it's important to consider that and make sure that your promotion is consistent with who you're trying to promote your business and your products towards. Okay, resource analysis. So this is what your actual goods/services are made of, and how your business operates. So fixed resources are, things that do not vary with cost. So this would be rent, equipment, utilities, stuff like that. So what does your business need to run? Do you need an office? Do you need a garage? Do you need what kind of equipment do you need? Do you need vehicles? Stuff like that. These all have monthly costs usually, and so what are those going to be? Now, the list of what you need is probably going to mostly come from you. But in terms of the prices, these should be researched. And it won't take long. If you need an office, like an office floor in a building, then just Google, do a retail search, like offices for rent in Ottawa, and then find one that meets your needs, pull it up. It'll have a price on there, or at least it should. There's your price. Explain why you're choosing the office and give the URL. It should probably take, 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. And that's a thorough search. It should probably take you 5 minutes to find that. The more thorough you go, the better. But in terms of actually covering this stuff, my recommendation would be pick the most important ones first and then proceed. So obviously a space, like your rent is going to be one of the most important. Then equipment probably. Then utilities, communication stuff, furniture, and proceed in that fashion. Consumable resources. So this is stuff that varies each month. So this is where your ingredients comes in, your whatever materials you need to make your actual product. Office supplies, so paper, pens, and stuff like that. If you're going to do everything digitally, then say that. What else? Now, this is usually bills are fairly consistent. It depends on what kind of business you're in, but this should be consistent. Wages should also be consistent. I'm going to move that. I'm going to move both of these. I'm actually going to move all three of these. Oh, why is it there? Okay. Inventory is the actual product you're selling. Now, when I say ingredients, this assumes that you're making the stuff. If you're just buying a product from someone else, adding some stuff, then explain how much it costs to buy the inventory from someone else and then the cost of the stuff you're adding in. You don't need to give me every single thing. Obviously, the more detail there is here, the more research that's done, the higher your achievement will be. But proceed from the most important stuff onwards, and move in that fashion. Let's see. But yeah, most of this can be found fairly easily through Google searches. If you want, I would recommend recording your costs in a table. Startup means like a one-time payment sort of thing. It's also referred to as capital cost. So if you need to buy equipment and you found it on Etsy eBay or Kijiji or whatever, and the machine you need is being offered for like, let's say, $2,000, then you could include that here as a one-time startup payment. Usually expensive equipment like industrial ovens and stuff like that are bought kind of like a mortgage for a house, except not for as much money. And so they'll have monthly payments. Sometimes that's harder to find. Just do your best, and don't spend an hour trying to find it. But obviously, if you can find numbers, it's better. Monthly is better. If you have annual, I recommend just converting it to monthly. It just makes things more consistent, and it gives you a clearer notion as to what your costs are going to be per month so that you can figure out how much money you have to make to pay those off. Human resources. So how are you going to treat your employees? What policies are you going to have in place? This comes down primarily to your management style. Explain that management style. Which management functions do you think will play the most role and why? And ground those management functions. Describe, the planning, controlling, I forget the other two, but they're in your management leadership lesson. But describe each one of those and how will they actually be carried out. And this will vary depending on what business you're in. Same thing with management skills. There's a couple slides devoted to that in Unit 4. So look at those skills. Some will play a massive role and some won't really be applicable, depending, again, on what kind of business you're in. So outline what kind of manager you need to be or what kind of manager you need to hire. Which leadership skills and functions will you prioritize and which ones have the biggest value and why? And this will obviously depend a lot on what kind of business you're running. Like if you're if you're offering a service for seniors, then having some humor might be a good idea, but you don't want to confuse them. You don't want to be so sarcastic or telling so many jokes that your customers don't understand what you're saying, or they could get misled, right? You have to find the line. So in your policy, explain how you want your employees to behave towards each other and towards customers, how you expect customers to be treated, what do you want employees to do in a difficult situation? How do you expect employees to interact with each other? How do you expect them to interact with customers? Outline what skills you need from employees, and obviously this will depend on what kind of business you're in. What skills and experience do you want? And that's most of this. What jobs do you need right away? It's very safe to make the assumption that you're just starting, or that you've just started. So what would the bare minimum number of jobs be, and what skills would those jobs need? Now, you don't need, depending on your business, again, be strategic, right? If there's 10 different jobs, then maybe just state what the jobs are and then go through a couple of them. You know what I mean? Go through the most important ones. If your business is growing, or if you think it'll grow fast, then maybe say what additional jobs you might require to accommodate this growth. You see what I mean? A lot of this is strategic thinking and handling the most important stuff first. What else? Financial plans. So your startup date, what will your fiscal year be? Will you go with debt financing or equity financing? Check your lessons for what those are. Each has a pro and con, and if you can invest a certain amount in it, what would that be? What would you hope to get from your investors? What would you give your investors in return in exchange for starting up? That kind of thing. And that also ties into your personal budget. So how much could you contribute? Do you think your parents would help you out? This would apply to your partners as well. How much do you think you need? That should be based on research, by the way, how much you think you need. Your startup costs should also be, and some of these will come from earlier from this part here. But startup costs are a little different than regular monthly costs. There are one-time payments you have to make initially for things that you buy, depending on what they are. There's costs involved in setting things up for the very first time. So you can Google common startup costs for whatever your business is, and then that's research for you to cite as well, which will back up your claims, which is always good. Operating costs, that'll be repeated, but that's okay. Your startup costs would have been covered earlier. So how much money do you think you could make, to pay this stuff back? Now, when you're doing this, you'll probably notice that you're going to be operating at a loss for a while, and that's to be expected. You're not expected to be in a positive income state even within the first year or two. Most of the time, owners don't cut themselves a profit for 5 years. Now, that's not to say, they don't cut themselves a salary. My apologies. There is a difference. Companies should be profitable within 5 years, obviously, but cutting yourself a salary is very different than just taking the profits and using those to pay your bills. Explain what kind of revenue you think you'll get. Maybe explain how you think it'll increase, and that's represented by your income and balance sheets. Again, the more specific you can be, the better, but if you have to make some stuff up, it's not a big deal. Just make sure it's realistic. My expectation, depending on how you foresee this happening, I'm going to put the 5 years as optional. It's largely hypothetical. So again, pick your battles, right? Or actually, maybe I should highlight this because I don't want you to think the whole thing is optional. And appendix. So appendix is where you include, so if there's graphs of stuff you found, if you're taking data from a big document and you're only taking pieces, you would include that stuff here. This is also a place to add any information that hasn't been covered in all of this. So this is sort of an exceeding expectations area. Now, I've already explained a few areas where you can exceed expectations. Generally speaking, the more research you can do that is helpful, the better. The more thorough you are, the better. The more applicable the info that you find, the better. And in terms of being specific and demonstrating your learning from different lessons, the better. So those are some primary ways to exceed expectations. And if you have additional info that you think would be useful, but it didn't fit in the report, then put it here. And that's it. Make sure you do a spell check. You want this document to look professional. And that's it. So that's your business plan. Now, these other three documents, this is, whoa, not now, Grammarly. Grammarly is great, by the way. If you don't have it, get it. It's a free extension. I've used it for a couple of years. I haven't paid for it. I'm not advising you to spend money on it, but it should be a free thing, and it looks over what you type, and it's super useful. So definitely get that. Okay, so this is how you're graded, essentially. And you're graded section by section, as you can see. I'm not going to read all of this because it's going to take a long time. But my advice is aim for this. You ever heard the expression, aim for the stars, hit the moon? So if you aim to do this, then worst case scenario, you'll probably be in level 3 at a minimum. I'm not saying that that's guaranteed. I'm also not saying that it wouldn't be lower. I'm just saying that if you do what's listed here, you're positioning yourself to be as successful as possible. And obviously, if you have questions, email me if you want to talk. I'm going to set up some office hours. I've been taking office hours by email request. But I think I might actually put in some time, like a half an hour tomorrow and a half an hour Thursday, where I'll make sure that I'm sitting in front of my computer, and if you want to talk, I'll be there. But yeah, this is how you're being assessed. So this is sort of the key for what I'm looking for. Now these two documents, writing the description of the business. So these are guides on what Ms. Daya felt were the most sort of vague sections of the summative. So if you're not sure what to put for the description of the business, have a look at this. This, just on a real note, this is very important. Obviously the rest is really important, but this is where level 4 territory comes in. Because it's not enough to just have a business that does something well unless there isn't many businesses that do it. If you're in an industry where a lot of people do stuff, the same thing as you, then you want to set yourself apart somehow. Okay, Grammarly, get lost. You're awesome, but get lost. Yeah. And some of this will come down to research, and some of this will come from you and your partners. Oh yes, and the marketing strategy. Here's a great one. This tells you how to go through these things. Oh my God, Grammarly. And this is a great one for the market section. I think the marketing section is the biggest part of the summative. So this should just give you a procedure as to how to go through those sections, okay? So it's just a little more detailed. That's all it is. And make sure you refer to your lessons. You're not expected to pull this out of thin air. You know what I mean? Like, use the lessons as guidelines. That's what they're there for. And if you have questions, ask me. And yes, so after all this seems like a lot of info, and it is, but that's why it's a group project. And obviously my expectations for a group of 4 will be higher than that of a group of 2. But sharing the load is important here. Make sure you define the sections you're taking clearly in terms of who's doing what. My recommendation is to break it by section if you can. Another thing, if you felt that you really struggled in an earlier part of the class, like let's say you struggled in marketing. Let's say you didn't do well in the marketing part of the class. Then I would advise that you take the marketing section. Because if your learning for that section improves a lot, let's say you've had time to learn it better and you've done some more research and maybe you're like, oh God, I didn't understand that before, but now I do. Then that can raise your grade. So do that, okay? If you have questions, email me. I'll set up office hours. And yeah, I hope this video helped. I can't think of anything else to say. Take care, good luck, and spend your time wisely. Tackle the most important stuff first and then add detail after. And yeah, I hope it's a big project, but I hope you find it interesting, especially because it's your idea. And I mean, almost any idea can be turned into a business if it's done properly. So, there might be some legitimacy in the idea that you've chosen. So take it seriously because you never know what could happen. And yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your day. Contact me if you have questions, and I will see you later. All right, bye.